you're sitting in prison and you're thinking about how you've come here. It feels like a waste of time. And it's like, what have I done to myself? How have I destroyed my life this way? But then I think I can either wallow in this misery, right? Or I can change my perception and see how I can make the best out of my circumstances. And there's a quote in my book. It says, from a clock's perspective, everything works anti-clockwise. So I may be in a dark situation, in a crappy situation. But if I change my perspective and look at it and what can I do to make the most out of my time? Well, I can read books. I can help other guys in here who don't have the mindset that I have. I can probably write a book in here. That'll be a good start.
There is rarely a life untouched by hardship or challenge. On this podcast, we invite our guests to share their very personal stories. We harness the wisdom and resilience of our guests, which has shaped who they are today.
Carl Rogers said, "That which is most personal is in fact most universal." Together we'll be inspired to embrace the resilience in our own stories and to gain strength in the face of adversity and have a few laughs along the way.
Hi, I'm Donna.
And I'm Di. We are the Double Ds and welcome to the Discovery Diaries.
We acknowledge the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation as the traditional custodians of the land on which we are recording this podcast. We pay our respects to the elders past and present and acknowledge their spiritual connection to family and storytelling.
Both Donna and Di were born here on these lands. We are grateful to draw on the culture of telling and sharing stories, and we hope that you will draw inspiration from the stories that are shared here.
In this episode, we talk to Ian McTavish, a personal trainer who specialises in transforming the mind. Mind over physical matter is his philosophy. With over 17 years of experience as a personal trainer, he has worked with thousands of clients, helping them to break old patterns of behaviour and create new identities to live by. He believes change occurs when we are stoic and accountable to becoming the highest version of ourselves. He is the author of a book called A Prisoner's Wisdom, Transcending the Ego, and a lot of this podcast today, this conversation with Ian, is about his time in prison and some of the things he learnt there. He's also editing his latest book, which is soon to be released and is titled The Alchemy of Love. And Di and I do have some fun conversation about that book in this conversation. When not coaching clients, Ian enjoys cooking for friends and family or reading books on self-development. Ian is also completing a Bachelor of Psychology, and you can follow Ian on social media on Instagram, IRON _Mac, MACK. We hope you enjoy this fun conversation with Ian McTavish. Welcome, Ian. Great to see you in a different environment.
Good to see you again, Ian. I think last time we saw each other, you were giving me a boxing class, and I probably wasn't turning up when I said I would, and you'd probably rearranged a few things for me. Would that be right?
That'll be correct.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me, guys. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, so just a little bit of a story about how Ian and I know each other.
Yeah.
So I broke my foot in 2021, so I had to start going to the gym because I couldn't walk, run, etc. Started going to the gym, and not long after that I went to a workplace psychologist who said, "Donna, you need to start boxing classes."
Oh.
And at the gym I'd noticed Ian, and he's a full-on, very hard trainer with boxing and skipping and all sorts of things. So I thought, I know the person that can do boxing training with me, and that was almost 2 years ago. So
Do you remember that first meeting,
Yes,
Ian?
I remember Donna's first meeting, and I remember how uncoordinated she was.
Oh.
Sorry, guys.
Has there been some improvement?
But I tell you what, persistency pays off, because now she's got her coordination together, so
yeah,
shows what you can do when you don't give up and keep that up.
watch out, Rocky. That's what I say. All right, well, let's start with your background, Ian. I know you grew up in South Africa. So, can you just tell us a little bit about what it was like, where you grew up, your family?
Yeah, well, I was born in Durban, South Africa, and at the time when I was young, they still had the Apartheid system. So I know a young audience probably won't even know what the Apartheid system is, but it was abolished in 94, I think, when Nelson Mandela got out of prison. But when I grew up, it was still very much part of South Africa. And apartheid system is the black and white segregation, and coloureds and Indians segregated, which means we had a Group Areas Act. We were allowed or allocated certain areas to live in. And also, one of the things I experienced as growing up is I was told to get off a golf course because of the colour of my skin. And I was also told to get off the beach once because I went to a whites-only beach as a coloured person. And funny thing is, even though I was young and I was in the apartheid system, I never really embraced or acknowledged racism. I always just ignored it and never thought or related to it. Even though they tried to label me with a colour, I never saw myself as a colour. It was just something that I always was, grown up with for no reason. It just was a part of my life where I never subscribed to what was given to me, if you know what I mean.
So what an example, and when you got, told to get off the beach or get off the golf course, what were you thinking when you were a kid and that happened?
I never read into it. I just knew what the laws were, and I understood that this is how South Africa is, and that's what the people believe. But I think my parents explained to me growing up that this is what happens, and so I was ready for it, if you know what I mean. I wasn't shocked when it did happen.
So you were, because this is an audio, so you're from an Indian background, so you were considered...
No, I'm a coloured.
Coloured.
Mixed
so
race coloured,
yeah, so you were considered a coloured.
Yeah.
So I knew about apartheid and I knew about the black and white, but I didn't know that much about the coloured side of things. And I have recently read Nelson Mandela's autobiography, a brilliant book, Long Walk to Freedom. So something I read there, and just so people get an understanding of what it was like with these white, African and coloured. So this was when Nelson Mandela was in prison in 1960. So this is what he says about the food. He says, although we were kept together, our diet was fixed according to race. For breakfast, African, Indians and coloureds received the same quantities, except that Indians and coloureds received half a teaspoonful of sugar, which we did not, which was Africans. For supper, the diets were the same, except that Indians and coloureds received 4 ounces of bread, while Africans received none. This latter distinction was made on the curious premise that Africans did not naturally like bread, which was a more sophisticated or Western taste. The diet for white detainees was far superior to that for Africans, and so colour conscious were the authorities that even the type of sugar and bread supplied to blacks and whites differed. White prisoners received white sugar and white bread, while coloured and Indian prisoners were given brown sugar and brown bread. It's just unbelievable reading something like that, isn't it? But that was like life. Every single thing in life was.
And when you grow up with that, it's just normal. It's not even foreign to you. And the thing is, because of the tone of our skin, the coloureds and the Indians grow up together, like in the same suburbs sometimes, very close to each other, because we brown, and then because the blacks are darker, they would be living in another area because their skin tone is darker. And then whites were totally on the other side of the suburbs.
And what was your parents, what was the messaging you got from your parents about race?
Well, at school, politics were never brought up. They tried not to talk about politics. They leave that to the parents. And so my parents would just tell me what we are, and try not to give us too much inferiority complexes, So, but I guess for some people that inferiority complex can come on them, and they may dislike their colour. But for me, my dad and my mum were proud of who they were. So that was instilled in me. I was always proud of who I am. And to this day, I never want to be any other colour than what I am. I'm very proud of my race and my heritage. So it's not something that I would be offended of, So yeah, when you're proud of something, or when you value yourself, it's hard to be offended. And I valued myself from a very young age, and, it was never something I saw as an inferiority complex.
Yeah, and it sounds like you kind of had a pretty secure, happy home.
It was a very secure,
Yeah.
And my parents were born-again Christians growing up as well, so that was instilled into us that we are created in the image and the likeness of the Creator, so that helped a bit. And so
just a bit.
Yeah, it's like, oh, okay, I'm created just like the Creator, so hey, yeah.
Pretty special.
And how old were you when you came out to Australia?
13 years old.
Yep.
Yeah, and I went straight to high school here in Australia.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And so, Ian, we know a little bit about, you know, when you've been doing your personal training, you're very open about your story. And we know that you had a spell in prison. And what happened between 13 years old and prison?
Well, I do believe, as you and a psychologist, and you would know that when you're a child or growing up in that first 6 years, you get downloaded a lot of the information from the environment. And living in a coloured area and living in South Africa, there is a lot of violence around. So you get to witness a lot of that. Even driving down to school, you might see some kind of violence going on. And then in the school, there's a bit of violence. So people are accustomed and get used to violence growing up. Now, that's sort of constructed in me growing up. So also in our community, a lot of problems are solved with violence. And the solutions are solved with violence. So as I grew up and I encountered a problem, I sought to solve that problem with violence because that's what I was learned growing up.
Yeah, it was modelled in your community. Yeah.
And obviously education fixed that. And reasoning in life.
So I did. So you have written a book about your time in prison. So Prisoner's Wisdom, Transcending the Ego. So do you want to just share a little bit about how you ended up in prison? And I think this book sort of outlines kind of almost your transformation that you went through during that time.
Yeah, so I committed a violent crime. It was a dispute over property, and I injured a guy, really badly. So I was sentenced to 2 years prison, in which I did one at the bottom. So when they say one at the bottom, that means you get out on good behavior. That's your parole at 1 year. So if you're given a sentence of 6 years, you'll do 3 at the bottom if you behave yourself. So my goal in prison was to actually really behave myself and not get provoked into any further, fights or anything like that. So that was my number one priority. I wanted to do my time as quick as possible and get out. When you do go to prison, the first thing you realize is that you surrounded by the lower class of society, and it's in your face almost 24/7, where there are opportunities to get provoked into, fights and, that kind of thing. So
were you afraid when you first went in?
I wouldn't say afraid, but I was very down and sad. I was like, because I'm not used to that kind of life. I had a pretty good life before going in. I was like doing well in life. And
how old were you, Ian?
I was around 30 years old.
30?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, 48 now. So it's a few years ago. But, so
you were sad rather than anxious?
Yeah, I just felt like I threw my life down the tubes for a period of time. I thought I was going so well, and I made one mistake, I acted on impulse. And actually, I preach a lot about impulse over contemplation. A lot of problems arise from people acting out on impulse. Or even if someone's trying to diet, one of the things that throw people off their diet is acting on impulse. So if there's a bag of chips and you just decide you want that bag of chips, that's acting on impulse, whereas contemplation will make you think about, okay, do I really need that bag of chips?
I really need to hear that, Ian, because I'm a spontaneous kind of girl. I don't know about you, Donna, but like impulse, that's big for me.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And most guys are in jail because of impulse.
Yeah.
So if we can understand that impulse and contemplation are the two ends of the spectrum where you get to, impulse is sort of something that we might have been in our nature from being, cavemen back in the day, where you had to have that impulse to run away from a tiger or a saber-tooth or whatever. But as we get more, as we evolved, that's something that we should actually let go of.
And I guess, this is the psychologist coming out, but it's, the difference between responsiveness and reaction. Yeah. And I'm hearing that the contemplation is kind of the way to get to responsiveness.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
That is, pretty much the same thing, different words.
Yeah.
So, Ian, just reading through your book, it seems as though as soon as you got into prison, one of the things that you decided, besides not getting into any fights and things like that was that you didn't want to waste any time, that you had this time that you had to go there, and you sort of made a decision, I'm going to make the most of it.
Yeah, because immediately.
So what did you do?
Yeah, so in that moment of time, so you're sitting in prison and you're thinking about how you've come here. It feels like a waste of time, and it's like, what have I done to myself? How have I destroyed my life this way? But then I think I can either wallow in this misery, right, or I can change my perception and see how I can make the best out of my circumstances. And there's a quote in my book. It says, from a clock's perspective, everything works anti-clockwise. So I may be in a dark situation, in a crappy situation, but if I change my perspective and look at it and what can I do to make the most out of my time? Well, I can read books. I can help other guys in here who don't have the mindset that I have. I can probably write a book in here. That'll be a good start. So that's when it started. Day one, I decided to, okay, I'm in a crappy situation, but what can I do about it?
I'm really curious about that, Donna, because because that's something that sounds like you already had that mindset before you went in. It's not something that you necessarily developed in prison, but actually day one, you just adjusted your mind in some way about the way that you're going to show up in prison. And
that's why the book's called A Prisoner's Wisdom, Transcending the Ego. The reason I went to prison is because of having a young, big ego. And I think young men, tend to have egos. And that ego is strongly correlated with being impulsive as well. They love each other, ego and impulse, So that was one of the reasons I made a mistake and acted out on impulse instead of contemplating. So my book is a lot about having that little time where you contemplate your next move.
So what other strategies did you draw down on when you're in prison? Because you straight into writing, straight into that mindset of making the most of it. What else was going on for you that you drew on?
Well, my father taught me to read books from a young age and always add value to your life. And so I was a strong believer in adding value to my life. So those habits were still instilled in me. So I just continued with with the same formula of adding value to my life. I was just in a situation that was horrible. But I continued to read as many books as I possibly could. And my favorite author was Dr. Wayne Dyer. Read quite a few of his books in there. And he was one of the instrumental authors that helped me see life from a totally new perspective.
What's his quote? If you change the way you look at things, the
things you look at change.
The things you look at change,
yes.
Yeah.
And there you go. From a clock's perspective, everything works anti-clockwise.
And I guess you had a hell of a lot more time to read books than you did otherwise.
Exactly. Oh, yeah.
This podcast is brought to you by my weekly newsletter, which is Donna's Balcony Views newsletter. This is a short weekly free newsletter that I write with the theme of building resilience and improving well-being. It contains 2 things I've experienced, 2 things I've learnt from others, such as speakers, podcasts, books or articles, and a personal story from someone else about what they do for their resilience or their well-being.
What I love about your newsletter, Donna, is it's really bite-sized and it's extremely easy to read. In a couple of minutes, I've got some great resources and some little tips that I might try. And I read it this morning again, and it just gave me some idea of what I could focus on, some morning questions and some evening questions, and I'm really enjoying it.
If you would like to sign up for my weekly newsletter, my free weekly newsletter, go to my personal website, which is www.donnasbalconyviews.com.au, or on Instagram at Donna's Balcony Views. So I did, there were some other things that in the book that I did like as well, and in particular you put a lot of manifestations, so little sayings on your cell wall. Mm-hmm. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, so the problem that I would have encountered a lot, well, I did encounter a lot, was every now and then someone will antagonize me there. Now, insanity is a man doing the same thing and expecting different results. And if I were to react on impulse when someone antagonized me and then fought in prison, then I'd probably end up doing more time. So I had to really struggle with my ego. My ego wanted to retaliate to someone antagonizing me. So There are guys in there in prison who don't care about you. They might be doing life, or they might be in and out all the time of prison. So they don't care that about your life. They just want to, start trouble or whatever. So you have to be a bit street smart in there as well to not allow that to happen. And one of the things I did was I put some quotes on my wall in my prison cell to help me make decisions that weren't impulsive. And one of them was a quote from the Proverbs. It says, "A man who is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he that rules his spirit is better than the man that takes a city." Also, there's another proverb that says, "Like a city broken down without any walls, so is a man who has no rule or control over his emotions." And if you think of at the time or the era that proverb was written, it was written in ancient times when the cities were protected by great big walls. And those walls kept invaders out or bandits out. So when the city had no walls, it was easily overcome, and the women and the children were taken captive or imprisoned. Now that relates to the soul. If we don't have control and rule over our emotions, we are easily overcome by the bandits or by outside circumstances. So I had to put those scriptures up on my wall and read them and by heart them. As you can see, I've got no notes and I can just say them off the top of my head because they're now instilled into my subconscious, and I am now living that out because I put it in there. And that's one way of overcoming the ego. My ego and my problem was always retaliating and hitting guys because I was good at it. So.
We can vouch for the muscles, can't we, Donna? We've seen them, and we've been on the receiving end of those the pads.
Yeah. And I think sometimes when you're a young person, you validate yourself on those outward appearance things or your ego. You get validation from that. And as you become mature and grow yourself and your soul, you realize that was just futile and ego,
And it didn't, because what I'm wondering if our listeners will be curious about as well is like, did it make you a target because you didn't retaliate?
No. They will leave you alone eventually when you don't give don't give the
you don't
reaction.
feed it. You don't react. Yeah.
Yeah. If I was in prison, I wouldn't be targeting Ian either. That wouldn't have been a good move. So, it seemed like that was a big turning point in your life. You kind of got more control over your mind, I guess.
Oh, yeah. It was a perfect training ground. I feel like that was a training ground for me to handle situations where I don't react on impulse.
Yeah.
And that just made the rest of my life easier coming out into normal society because I controlled myself in there and I learned how to not react with ego and not to be impulsive. I learned that in prison. I did the yards in prison with some of the worst of society. So anything I face now outside of prison is just easy because you've had the training.
So just tell us a little bit about what it was like after you came out of prison. I know that was when you started to train to become a personal trainer as well, but how was it when you got out?
The appreciation levels went through the roof because I had TV and I'd see like an ad on TV for a burger. And I was missing a burger. I just wanted a burger. Right? And the thing is, when you're in prison, you don't have that freedom to go out and get a burger. Mm. And I love coffee. And one of the things I missed was a percolated coffee. Mm. And I don't like instant coffee. It tastes like...
I'm with you there.
Tastes like Panadol. I just don't like the taste of instant coffee. And I just wanted a decent coffee. And getting out of prison and having that coffee. So I went to Fremantle in Gino's Cafe and I sat down by myself, watched the people walk past on a beautiful afternoon, and I sat and drank this coffee. And I never felt so much appreciation for a $5, $4 cup of coffee in my life. And from that day, I never forget it. I really appreciate the little things in life, and I extract the joy out of the smallest things in life now.
Yeah,
the
so
mundane.
What would be an example of that today, in the everydayness of your normal life?
Yeah, well, my job.
Okay.
I really enjoy my job, and I get so much satisfaction from training people and doing what I love because it doesn't feel like I am working. So, there's the saying that says, do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. Well, that's how my life feels like. Every day is just I love it. I extract so much joy. And I don't think you need millions of dollars to go out to the coffee shop and have a $5 coffee. You can be broke and you can enjoy and extract joy out of a beautiful meal. Whereas some people think that they need to have millions in the bank before they can be happy. But if you learn to extract joy out of the mundane, the smallest things, your life will be blissful. What's the difference if you have $1 million in your bank and you have a coffee, or you have a few bucks in the bank?
I guess there's a real pull though, isn't there? You know, we compare ourselves easily to other people, what we don't have. It's a real sort of deficit often of thinking about what it's easier to think about what we don't have than what we do.
Wow.
But the practice seems to be to really be present with what you do have.
Yeah, they say comparison is a thief of joy.
Yeah.
And that's where you see a lot of people in today's society, they're comparing themselves to the people on Instagram or in life. And that robs your joy, because you're comparing to what you don't have. But as I said before, you don't need much to be present and to enjoy and extract joy out of the mundane, the simplest things.
Well, I know I go out for coffee most days, and I think I'm going to definitely appreciate a hell of a lot more than what I might have done normally. You just kind of you take these sorts of things for granted, but you're right.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a real mindful sort of moment coming out of prison. It must have been pretty. I actually not to compare, but the analogy that my mind goes to is even 2 weeks in quarantine. You know, when I came out from the UK, just 2 weeks I'd been in a box with not even been able to open a window. Not at all prison, but for just those 2 weeks I was really disorientated, and then coming out and just having the first meal that I could choose, you know, and it was, I think there's something about having choice actually can be something as well that really kind of too much choice makes us overwhelmed, but then we need a certain amount of autonomy and choice, don't we, as well, to thrive. Yeah. And I think some of our guests might be thinking, you know, there'll be a lot of people who go to prison who spend the same amount of time as you, maybe for even the same crime, and they don't move forward in the same way. They don't maybe have the same look on life that you do, and they're not moving forward in their life in the way that you have. When you look back on that, what did you draw down on that you think maybe others could learn from that you haven't talked about yet? Because lots of people don't do what you do. Yeah.
Well, I did see a lot of guys repeat offending. And I thought to myself, why are these guys, I actually had that thought, why are these guys repeating this life? And what do they not know the difference? Or do they not contrast freedom to being, imprisoned? And I did realize that they have very little role models or mentors to look to.
And so who were those role models in your life?
Well, my father, my brother, and I read a lot of books too. So even if you don't have the ability to have a personal role model, you could use a person in a book and model of them. For instance, like someone doesn't have to go to prison to find appreciation out of the mundane, but they could read Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. And you see how Viktor Frankl lived and handled his situation in a prison camp, and saw how he extracted joy out of the mundane. And then you could say, well, I can do that too. So role modeling doesn't mean you emulate someone to the T, but you can, I've always learned to take little bits out of people and apply them to my life. So things that I like from people, like their characteristics and their traits that I admire, I will take that and apply it to myself and make myself this complete individual, this whole individual, by stealing bits and pieces that I like of other people and applying it to myself.
That's the best kind of stealing, right?
Yeah.
Where the stuff resonates and then you go, I'll have a bit of that. Yeah. Thanks very much.
I like the way that guy walks, or I like the way he carries himself, and I will apply that until it becomes a part of me,
Yeah.
Well, I'll be taking a bit of your boxing expertise, Ian, from me, hopefully.
This podcast is brought to you by my business, Coming Up for Air. That's coming up number 4, AIR. This is a business which cultivates curiosity, compassion and courage through executive coaching, workshops and leaders' retreats. Donna, you've been to one of my retreats.
Yes, and as a senior leader, I decided to invest in myself and go for a day. It was on the weekend, a full day retreat. I'm so glad I did go. It was just what I needed in my life at that time. We spent time on our own, reflecting on questions that you gave us, Di. We spent time with others there, being creative, which I don't often get the chance to do in everyday life. And my absolute favourite part was spending some time with the horses that were on the property. The horses have such a calming effect, and I just left the retreat feeling completely rejuvenated and had time to think about some important life questions that you don't usually take the time out to think about.
Thanks, Donna, and I didn't pay her to say that. I do run retreats at various times through the year, which are open retreats, ideal for leaders, just as you said, Donna, to get away from the busyness of work and life, and often we don't take this time to invest in ourselves. You can find me on Instagram or at comingup4air.com.
So there's some other things that you've done in recent years. So do you want to tell us a little bit more about you're doing a psychology degree?
Yes.
And you're also writing a new book.
Yeah. So I'm 7 more units to complete my undergrad in psychology, and I'm been writing a book to help people in relationships. I saw a need while I've been training people for the last 17 years. I saw there's a need for, like, amongst the young clients that come to me, they seem to be struggling in relationships or settling with their partner, with the partner they're with. Like, I find, like, it's, why would you settle? Like, you need to be really happy in your relationships, because that's a major decision. You're going to spend the rest of your life with this person. You're going to share your finances with this person, and you're probably going to have children with this person. So you want to choose right. You don't want to just settle. And I found that a lot of people were incomplete individuals coming together and saying that this other person completes them. So we have 50% people coming together and trying to be complete. But my philosophy, and especially the flow of the book, is mostly about being complete and whole within yourself. And when you're complete and whole within yourself and you come into a relationship, you're more likely to give. And you're not a needy person. You're in a relationship and you're there to complement the other person, not complete them. So my partner and I have been together 6 years, and we are so complementary of each other. We are totally opposite to each other, but we complement each other. And one of the beautiful things about my relationship is there's absolutely no jealousy and no mistrust. We are totally open and honest with each other, and I'm allowed to have female friends, and there's no jealousy, and she can have a male friends, and there's no jealousy. And I think that's a very beautiful thing.
It sounds like a really trusted relationship. I've seen that visual where you get two circles and you want, those circles to be pretty much complete, but they have a little bit of overlap, like that piece in the middle is where you overlap. But it's when we get so much overlap that we just, lose our sense of ourselves. Yeah. And that sounds like the opposite of what you're saying, is that you've got points of connection, but
you don't want to lose yourself in the other person. You want to still be an individual, and that person is there to help you become the best version of yourself. They complement you. And I did notice that in the young generation, sometimes they're just incomplete and trying to, find themselves while they're still half a people, half a human, you know what I mean?
I also heard a story about, someone that wanted to meet this amazing person, and so then they wrote down all the qualities that they want this amazing person to be. And when they looked at the list, they thought, I'm not any of those things. And so then what happened was the person actually focused on them becoming what was on that list. And then after they worked on themselves for quite some time, they just it turned out that they did end up meeting someone like that as well. But it's just that it was more, if you want to meet a certain type of person, you've got to work on being that type of person yourself first.
Exactly. You can see the big smile on my face, because that's exactly what I've written in my latest book.
There you go.
Like, what do I have to become to attract this kind of person? So here's an example. I like to use myself as an example in all my writing. So I wanted to attract a certain kind of partner, and I wrote it down. I was specific and I wrote it down. But then I asked myself, okay, I want all these things, but what do I have to become to attract this kind of person? Water seeks its own level, like attracts like. In universal principles, in the law of attraction, it talks about these things. Life gives you what you deserve, not so much what you want. So, what am I going to become? How do I have to behave if I want to attract a certain kind of quality female in my life?
So what had to change in you to attract this amazing woman that you're now with then? Come on, spill the beans.
Oh, I got to spill the beans. Well, I was a party boy for a little bit. I was going to the clubs and, being promiscuous. And there was a point in time when you are that kind of person, you will tend to meet people on the same level. And being a total promiscuous person, you don't judge yourself. You judge others. You point the finger. You sort of say, oh, look at this person. They like that. And then I started to paint females with the same brush. And I started to say, all these women are no good. They're bad. They're terrible. And then I thought, hang on, there's some good ones. There's a lot more good ones. And if you think about heuristic availability, right? Can you explain to me what heuristic availability is?
No, I think you'll do a better job. It was a long time since I did my psych degree.
Yeah. Well, available heuristics is what comes quickly to the mind. For instance, if someone thinks there's a lot of plane crashes, they won't go on a plane because they think there's so many plane crashes. But there's a lot more car accidents than there are plane crashes. But according to available heuristics, that's all that comes to mind for them. It's similar to the reticular activating system where if you drive a yellow car, you see yellow cars everywhere.
Yeah, I remember when I was pregnant, it was the same thing, right?
Yeah, well, if you think that all men are dogs and pigs, well, that's what you're going to see. And that's what you will attract through the energetic system.
So you had to let go of a bit of partying.
Yes, I started to just knuckle down and stay home and work on myself and read books and do a lot of meditation. And eventually I started to date up as I became a better human. So
is that going to be the title of the book?
Date up, not down.
But it sounds like you could be the new dating guru, Ian.
Oh, well, I hope so, because I have helped a lot of people with that's where the book came from, because I was using some of these teachings to help my clients. And I thought, man, I should really write this in some kind of journal or a book. And then I put this book together. It's actually 10 chapters now.
Having going to these boxing classes with Ian and I've never done personal training sessions before. It is a lot of it. It's not just physical training. It sort of is, a lot of it is psychological and, having a positive mindset to get through these painful backward jumps and all this other type of thing. So I can see that for you it's not just training people physically.
Yeah. Now, Donna's got to tell her backwards jump story before we go. Come on.
I absolutely hated the backwards squat jumps and it was like torture, and I noticed that every time I complained, Ian gave me about 3 times as many.
Do you remember that, Ian?
Conditioning, that's what it is.
So I just said in my mind that I'm not going to complain about these anymore, so he doesn't know that I don't like them. But in doing that, in stopping thinking about how much I hated them, it was funny, after a couple of weeks, I didn't hate them that much anymore. So it just goes to show you can, if you think something's not as bad as if you go in saying, right, it's not that bad, eventually it won't be.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the other day I was running and I see this couple all the time on my running track. And this lady, I was stretching, and this lady said to me, I want your energy. Where do you get your energy from? And I thought to myself, I actually replied to her, I said, well, it's cultivated. And I do believe that energy is cultivated, because there's been times when I use this as an example. I've been tired on a Friday, like it's the end of the week, and I'm absolutely shattered. And I'm thinking, well, I'm just going to stay home and watch some Netflix and relax because I'm tired. I'm not going anywhere. Nobody call me. And then someone calls me. I said, do you want to go out and catch up for a drink? And a few of my friends are going to be there. And now I was tired, right? Physically, I was tired. But now that I'm all excited about catching up with my friends, that tiredness is gone, disappeared. But where did it go? I didn't have a Red Bull. I didn't have any supplement. The tiredness was in my mind. And the change of mind changed my physiology. There was no actual thing that I'd done to change how my energetic frequency, but the mind caused the energetic change. And now I'm like excited, I want to go out. And if I tried to stay home and sleep and nap, I wouldn't be able to, because I got excited. Yeah.
So with all that energy, what can we expect in, say, the next 5 years? We know there's a book coming out, but what else have you got in mind for life and for where you want to be and what you want to do in the world and how you want to show up, Ian?
Well, I'd like to show people that the mind is the most powerful thing. With the way I present myself, like I feel like I haven't aged in a few years because of my mind. And I feel like I managed to cultivate so much energy over time that has now become my persona and who I am. I am always energy. I'm never tired. I could do uni, I can do train, I can do so much. I work full time, and I still have this ability to maintain a high level of energy. And people wonder, my clients wonder how I managed to do this with such little sleep. But I think I've cultivated that. I've created that from nothing. And that was created in my consciousness. And I do believe that I could teach people to do this. Like you could have a mentality where you don't get tired and don't get fatigued. You can literally defy physiology with your consciousness.
Well, that might be a whole other podcast, do you reckon? I think we'll have to have you back on that one, Ian.
Yeah, I can go deep on those things. We can go into some Bruce Lipton. Yeah.
Well, this could be a new career for you as well, Ian, with I think this is your first podcast today, so very good. All right, well, interestingly, for people that are interested, Ian and I have done a free top 10 tips of sticking to a new gym routine. Ooh. So Ian's doing it from a professional trainer perspective and over all the years of his clients, what he's seen has worked well. And I've written 5 tips that have helped me. I've managed to go to the gym now for a couple of years, twice a week, and then I've just upped it to 3 times a week this year because I'm determined to do a proper push-up by the end of February, so we'll see how that goes.
Sounds amazing. I definitely need those tips, guys. Are you happy to share one of them with us?
Well, for me, I think just sort of saying at the beginning of the week, you've already decided you're going this time, this time and this time. And so it's non-negotiable. You don't kind of wake up and go, oh, I feel like sleeping in today, or you already know in advance, I go to the gym on Tuesday mornings, Thursday mornings, and that's it. So that for me has been very helpful.
And what's one that's going in for you, Ian?
I'll give 2 that I see that makes people change the most. And one is people who are not familiar with the gym and are scared of it or are daunted from going to the gym. If they make it familiar, if they make the unfamiliar familiar, they're more likely to enjoy the gym and not be so fearful of it, and not go back into old habits. So making the unfamiliar familiar. Because I did that with academics. I detest academics, and as in like assignments and that, sitting.
I hope you like
so
academic
it's not
podcasting.
Yeah.
You like podcasting studios in universities.
Yeah, as in, you know what I mean. But I'm doing it.
I think what you mean is you don't enjoy doing academia.
Yeah,
is that what we're hearing?
That's what it is.
As opposed to academic people.
Yeah, well, that's exactly.
Just for all the academic listeners out there.
That's right. Trying to explain it with people who hate the gym and training. They're like, I hate the gym or I hate training. But if you tell yourself you love it, and if you just reprogram yourself and make that unfamiliar environment familiar, you will start to like it. Now I do like academics, and I am doing my degree and I'm finishing it, but I had to make that unfamiliar part of my life because I never went near it. I used to read books, and I enjoyed reading books, and I enjoyed self-development, but I wasn't out there, sitting in lectures or, doing assignments. That was, that was a hard thing for me to get used to.
And what's your second tip?
My second tip is to love things, to love what you not necessarily like. You have to learn to tell yourself that you enjoy doing it. And if you tell yourself you don't like the gym, your subconscious mind will find a way to stop you from going to the gym, whether it be an injury, whether it be something occurring in your life through the energetic frequencies. Your subconscious mind is an obedient servant. If you ever came across the book, The Power of the Subconscious Mind, you would come to learn that the subconscious mind does the work behind the scenes to manifest things into your life, into your environment. So if someone hates the gym that much, they will get a sore knee, they will hurt their back driving. It's just because the subconscious mind says, oh, you don't like this? I'll make this happen for you.
So we need lots of I love full push-ups, Donna. Is that what we're saying?
right,
By the end, we'll all manifest that for
Absolutely.
you. Donna loves full push-ups.
Absolutely. So we're going to put this link to our top 10 tips in our show notes after this episode. So
Lovely.
are there any last comments or anything else you'd like to share, Ian, before we wrap it up?
I would say, spend as much time as you can developing yourself to become the best version or the highest version of yourself. Never stop doing that. There's always room for improvement to become the best version or the highest version of yourself. I do this to this day. Well, if I'm at home and I'm eating just a lunch, I'd say, what's the highest version of Ian going to eat right now? And, the highest version will choose the better option for food. Instead of eating the crap in the pantry, I will choose something that's going to give me the highest version of myself. And that's just a little tip. And that's just diet. That can be everything. What's that? Even in my relationship, if there is some kind of situation that, we all might encounter ups and downs, what's the highest version of Ian going to choose in this situation?
And that's actually quite a courageous thing in itself, over comfort, isn't it? The where we started this morning is with courage over comfort. So that sounds like a great tip for moving us into courage.
Yes.
Rather than the comfort of the pantry, which is I know where I go to sometimes.
Or even better, dealing with exes and children or custody or stuff. What is the highest version of that person going to choose? You could be the lowest version of yourself and be selfish and, get into arguments with your ex over different things. But the highest version of yourself will choose the latter and something better.
Well, thank you so much, Ian, for coming into our podcast today. It's been fascinating hearing about more detail about your life and your stories, and definitely your mindset's always been something that I've been very interested in because, that seems to be a big part of your personal training and just your life generally. So thank you very much for coming in.
And to our guests, we want to say that if you've enjoyed listening to Ian's story, reach out. He's got a great book, A Prisoner's Wisdom, Transcending the Ego, and look out for his next dating up, or whatever we're going to call it. But if you've enjoyed what we've done here today, then do share on the podcast and subscribe and like us and follow us. Maybe even give us a review if you start to listen and enjoy what we're doing. Follow us on Instagram with the Double Ds and Donna and Di.
At Double D's Discovery Diaries. And that's when we'll be having all our upcoming guests.
Great. And so, Ian, if you had a question for the next guest that you'd be really curious about when we think about resilience and courage and overcoming things, what would a question be for our next guest?
Wow, you put me on that spot there. But the question for the next guest I would ask is, how did you meet you two?
Oh, yeah, well, there's some upcoming guests with very interesting stories about that, actually. So, yeah. All right, well, thanks so much, Ian, and I shall see you with my boxing gloves on in a couple of days.
Thank you so much for having us, guys. I enjoyed that.
So, Di, wasn't that fantastic getting Ian in an environment where he's totally ill at ease and uncomfortable instead of him cracking the whip?
I know.
At the gym.
Exactly. Last time I think I saw him, I was outside and he was like making me do press-ups and then running. I was like, Ian, I can't do this anymore. And he's like, yes, you can.
Yeah, it was good to see him looking and feeling uncomfortable, but he did do a very good job.
He did. And then I think he was quite surprised, actually. He's seen us in a different light as well, Donna, right?
Exactly. Instead of being the most uncoordinated person he's ever trained.